From the Office of Adventist Mission at the Adventist Church World Headquarters, you're watching Mission 360, where we take you around the globe to experience lives, places, and mission. So stay with us as we visit a world of mission. The Adventist Church, when it first began, had a very limited view of mission. When they read the Great Commission to go into all the world, they believed that they could do that right here in North America. They saw the United States as a melting pot as different people came from all over the world migrating to this land of opportunity. So they felt that they could reach every nation, kindred, tongue and people right here in the United States. But it didn't take too long before the church realized that when Jesus said to go into all the world, he meant to go into all the world. And the Adventist Church found its missiological sea legs, and very soon missionaries were going to Africa, to Asia, to all parts of the world, and that mission program has only continued to increase. To talk to us about mission in a specific area of the world in Africa, our guest is Rick Kajira, who is the Communication Director for Global Mission.
Welcome, Rick, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here.
Now, we understand that you visited a project in the Maasai tribe. I know I've heard the name and I've heard things about it, but could you tell us a little bit more about Maasai?
So the Maasai are a tribal group that live in the Great Rift Valley of Africa. And they're very interesting because if you fly into Nairobi, Kenya, and you go into downtown, you see high rises and concrete buildings. But the Maasai, who are a couple of hours outside of Nairobi, in an area they call Maasai land, live a very traditional life, and it's something that they do intentionally. So they still keep cattle, they're herders by lifestyle, and you'll often see them. They wear these bright red blankets, and they're very tall and very thin people. The men will always carry this staff, and so they live in a way that they've always lived. They cling to the traditional ways, and it's a fascinating group of people.
And Rick, you probably went to Kenya and Nairobi to visit the Maasai as well as to visit some missionaries there. Can you tell us what they were doing there?
Actually, the missionaries were working with the Maasai. And I was visiting with Oscar and Eugenia Giordano, who are two doctors. And they're not in Kenya regularly, but they were there working with the Maasai doing AIDS education. They're with the Adventist AIDS International Ministry. It's a mouthful, I know, but they shortened it to AAIM. And they were there doing AIDS education because there's a lot of misconceptions about how AIDS is caught, you know. And when you work with a group of people that believe in spirits and things like this, they think, well, it's the spirits that are causing it, and so they don't change their practices, and so they're susceptible to AIDS. But if we can educate them and show them they can do things to prevent getting AIDS, then it makes a tremendous difference in their lives. And so we were in this one area, and there's actually an Adventist church there, a Maasai Adventist church group that meets there. And they have this wonderful concrete building there that, several years ago, an American group went over and built for them. But the Maasai themselves, they live in those traditional houses that they've always lived in.
Wow.
Now, where were these AIDS meetings being held?
Well, I mentioned that church that had been built, and they were actually holding the AIDS meetings in there. So every morning they would have a lecture, and everybody would come in there, and they would talk to the group. But then they would split off into the women and the men, and they would talk to them specifically about AIDS, because it's a little bit of a delicate topic when you're talking with the two genders. And the beauty of Dr. and Dr. Giordano is a man and a woman. So they would have Oscar go and talk to the men and the boys, and Eugenia would go and talk to the women. And the fascinating thing that Eugenia would say is, you know, when they're in that whole group, the women don't say a word. But as soon as they get into that group with a woman doctor, they just have all kinds of questions and comments, you know, one after another. And very lively discussions.
Very interesting. Rick, and while you're staying there, I don't know if you stayed with the missionaries, but what were the living conditions like there?
You know, some missionaries go over and they live in compounds, and Oscar and Eugenia live in southern Africa, but they're up there. But when they were there for over a week, and they stayed with the Maasai. So if you've ever been in a traditional Maasai house, it's made of sticks, and they plaster it with cow dung. And so that's where Oscar and Eugenia were living for the week. And they were kind enough to invite me to stay with them for one night. And I accepted. And although it is a hut, there were 2 rooms, but there was just like this sort of woven bed, mattress, and a mosquito net, and that's all there was. And I slept there that night, and it was just a fascinating experience. One of the things that really is great about it is when you wake up in the morning, because when you're actually out there and you have the silence and the darkness, and the Maasai warriors, the young men, came around and they wanted to show me some things, so we went out and walked a bit in the night. And they told me about these large creatures, they said, that are out there, sort of like a large rabbit. And I don't know if it was something they pull on people who don't know any better, but we went out walking, I never did see one. And then we got up early in the morning, and just the beautiful mist on the hills and the silence. It was awesome.
Wow. And I love hearing about these things that I've never lived before. So pardon all the questions, but what did you eat while you were there?
Well, they would cook, and the women would go to a little fire pit behind one of the buildings. And they also have a little school there, and so right there they had a little fire pit and they were cooking food. What was interesting to me is the food they gave us was like vegetable stew sort of thing with these flat breads. And my wife grew up as a missionary in India, and so I asked them, what are these flat breads called? And they said, oh, they're chapatis. Well, chapatis are an Indian bread. And I said, well, is that from here? And they said, well, we think so. But obviously there's some cultural sharing between India and Africa there, where they have chapatis and some sort of stew. So.
Very interesting. I feel like I took a trip there.
Right. Now all that we're missing is the stamp and the passport.
There you go.
Well, I was telling you about getting up in the morning, and the other thing that's really interesting is they walk a lot. And so we went out to visit a branch Sabbath school one morning, and they drove as far as they could, but they said, this is as far as we can drive. We've got to walk. And we walked.
Really?
Wow.
And if you ever try to keep up with a Maasai who's going up a hill walking, boy, would you be winded. And I was sitting, trying to keep up with them as best I could. I thought I was doing really well. And get to the top of the hill, and I'm just, and they just turned around and smiled at me and said, you're doing good.
They're very fit, I'm sure.
Yeah, they're very fit.
Rick, if people want to get involved and support projects like this and, support the missionaries that are working with the Maasai, how can you do that?
What Oscar and Eugenia are doing over there in Africa is supported by so many people around the world who support mission with their funds and with their prayers. And we sometimes think that the emphasis is on the money, but the prayers means an awful lot. And the people who do give regularly in that Sabbath school mission offering or the mission offerings are the ones who are helping mission to go forward all around the world.
That's beautiful and a great reminder for what we're doing and what we can do. Thank you so much for being here, Rick. I think we've enjoyed this experience a lot.
Thank you very much.
Let's now travel to Kenya and let's meet the Giordanos and the Maasai people and see what life is like in that part of the world.
To the Maasai, walking is a way of life. This morning they are walking to the Seventh-day Adventist Church to attend a seminar about HIV/AIDS. Many Maasai people continue to live a very traditional life, living in arid parts of the country where water is scarce. Fruit and vegetables are almost unheard of, and their diet consists almost exclusively of milk, which they drink at least 3 times a day. Longtime medical missionaries Oscar and Eugenia Giordano are in Kenya to share information about HIV/AIDS and to bring hope to those affected. The husband and wife team of medical doctors are heading up the Seventh-day Adventist Church's HIV/AIDS ministry in Africa, the Adventist AIDS International Ministry. They encourage Adventist congregations to find ways to help those infected with HIV, to accept them, and to give them hope. During the 5-day seminar, Oscar and Eugenia are staying in this Maasai manyata, made of branches, plastered with cow dung, and usually covered with grass thatch.
You see us in a manyata. This is a traditional Maasai house, and usually the Maasai houses are very, very dark inside, so the flies don't come. But this one has been tailored to a little bit to our needs, and there is light and there are flies. So
They are also given Maasai names. Eugenia was given the name of Nepota, which means full of knowledge, and Oscar was given the name Saruni, which means the one who came to help us. In the mornings before the programs begin, they walk the hills nearby, learning about Maasai ways, like the Maasai toothbrush. Just chew the ends of a branch from a special bush until you get bristles, and then brush away. The area has been hit hard by drought.
You see, this time we are experiencing one of the toughest drought in Maasai land history, because for the last 4 years we've never had a good rain to sustain the animals, and we have lost quite a number of animals. Almost 80% of the animals within the Maasai land have been wiped by the drought.
The drought takes a human toll too, especially on those infected with HIV/AIDS, who need nutritious food like vegetables to maintain their health. Someday, the Giordanos hope to have enough money to drill a well that will provide water for the surrounding area. During the seminars, the doctors share information about HIV/AIDS with the group. Then Dr. Eugenia spends time with the women and girls, and Dr. Oscar spends time with the men and boys. In the Maasai culture, most men have more than one wife.
Many people practice polygamy, and once if one is infected, the whole family is infected.
Yet many are afraid to be tested for fear they'll be ostracized. And there are other problems with getting people to understand how HIV/AIDS is transmitted. Some still believe that evil spirits are responsible for AIDS, and for some there are other more immediate needs.
You know, we found that the HIV message about prevention, if it comes alone, doesn't help very much because people are hungry. So we found that if we can give them practical solutions, they will listen. So here in Maasai land, this group of people, they have different income-generating activities. For example, they have a barber shop where the young people, they cut hair, they have an earning, and at the same time, every person that is sitting there will learn about HIV and AIDS.
The Giordanos also help by encouraging them to grow small kitchen gardens and providing a way for women to earn money by sewing, making beadwork crafts, and baking bread and cakes in a charcoal oven. There's no electricity here, and the closest barber shop and bakery are some 40 kilometers away. The Giordanos' HIV/AIDS ministry extends far beyond Maasai land. In Kenya, the Giordanos are helping support churches and other community organizations ministering to those with HIV/AIDS. The Kingero Adventist Church is helping grandmothers earn a living by sewing, crafts, and baking. They are also making and bottling liquid detergent, and they even have their own yogurt production, thanks to a new refrigerator bought by donors in Australia. But one project leader has a special place in the Giordanos' hearts. They met Angelina through the Adventist church across the street from their ministry. Angelina has been working with HIV/AIDS orphans and their grandmothers, often retired, who are suddenly faced with raising their grandchildren. AAIM has funded projects so that these grandmothers can grow gardens or earn a small income to help put food on the table. Recently, Angelina's been told that she, the grandmothers, and the orphans must leave the building where she's been running her programs. The Giordanos yearn to do more. Everywhere they turn, they see more needs, more people who need hope.
Help somebody and you will feel such a happiness in your heart that is priceless.
Coming up after the next break, we have Pastor John Thomas, a child of Africa, sharing his experience.
Treat yourself to Faith Tales of Frontline Missionaries. Every quarter, the Office of Adventist Mission releases never-heard-before stories of modern heroes. These are men and women who go beyond the call of duty to touch lives and bless people with the message of hope. This beautiful DVD is yours free if you call today. Here is the number you will need. Call today. Or visit us online.
Welcome back. Our next guest is Pastor John Thomas. He was born in Africa. He spent much of his life in Africa. He has Africa in his veins. He directs Adventist volunteer services for the World Church, and he's talking with Yali and with Angela.
Welcome, Pastor John.
Good afternoon.
Your family has a long history of missionary work. I guess it's already part of your DNA. If I touch you, I may become a missionary too. How far back does this go?
Well, it goes back to my grandfather. He was minding his own business working in England when the British Union president came to him and asked him to accept a call to go to Africa as a missionary. That was in 1924.
Wow.
And my father was born as a missionary child and also served with his brothers and spouses as missionaries in Africa.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything unique about your grandfather's call?
Well, yes. A couple unique things maybe. During those early times of missionary work in Africa, the British Union was the prime organization of the church that recruited and sent missionaries to Africa. So you found Norwegians, Danish, Germans, French, English people who went all over the continent of Africa. When my grandfather was approached to go as a missionary, he was told, now if you accept this call, you understand it is for life. Don't expect to come back and live in England. And by the way, you can't go unless you're married, so you better find a wife quickly.
Oh, wow.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. If you were to estimate all the years that your family has been a missionary, how many years would that be?
It's around 258 years.
Wow, that's
Wow,
a very long
that's
time.
All
a
to the
lot of
continent of
lifetimes.
Africa, yes.
Wow. And what has this taught you?
Well, it tells me that when God impresses upon your heart that you need to go and serve somewhere, it is the Christian's duty to listen to that impression and to act on it. And there is plenty of evidence as we look through the history of mission service today where children or relatives of missionaries are often called into mission service or even themselves go as volunteers because they feel that there is some calling that comes to them from family ties.
Mm-hmm. You must have experienced a lot while you're in the mission field. What has been the impact of your mission work and your family's mission work in the lives of the people that you encountered?
Well, my primary responsibility when I was a missionary in Kenya was to be the administrator of Maxwell Adventist Academy. So as such, I was administration and I was a teacher. From a teacher's perspective, there are many blessings that come. The first one is to see what happens to people who come to school at age 13, 14, 15. In the next 3, 4, 5 years, they become self-proficient, confident, skilled young adults who are ready to go and start the next phase of their life. So that's a wonderful transition to see. But especially now today with Facebook, we are able to keep in touch with each other years later, and we can follow what's happening with students from many years ago in their accomplishments now, the children they have, the jobs they get, where they live in the world. So there's kind of a double blessing that comes with today's missionaries.
Very nice.
Wow, it must be something to reconnect with some people after so much time as well.
It is true.
Now, what are one of your experiences from when you were missionary in Kenya?
Well, I will share one with you that was not really part of my job because it's one that really touched people beyond the scope of what was expected. And one of the things we have to know from being a missionary is you have to be adaptable and realize that what you are going to do isn't completely what you are asked to go and do. So you have to be adaptable. While serving in Kenya, we experienced a terrible drought. And enough that the leaves were falling off the trees, the grass was all gone. And down in the valley below where we were is where the Maasai live. And they are historically a nomadic tribe who herd goats, sheep, cows, and they live off those animals. Well, during the drought, these animals were dying by the thousands because there was nothing to eat. And so several of our local employees at the school were Maasai, and they used to come to me and say, please, can you do something to help our families? So I shared that need with several people, including some at the division, which is right behind the school campus. And we decided to try and do a letter writing, email campaign to raise some money. And we raised a considerable amount of money. We bought a water tank, put it on the back of the school's truck, and I started making deliveries down into the valley of water. And one day, one of our employees came to me and said, please take water to my village. So I said, okay. We made an arrangement. Sunday, I took the truck. We went to the village about an hour away. And he says, oh, no, we don't need it here. We need it at the next village. Oh. So I said, okay, can we drive there? Oh, yes, no problem. So we start down the 2 tracks through the forest. Eventually, it was 1 track, basically just a cow trail, and I'm trying to work my way through sandy river bottoms and up banks and around trees, no road.
Wow.
And an hour and a half later, we get to a village called a boma, and here come all the animals. And so we get ready to siphon all the water out of the tank into their containers to feed the animals. And first it was the sheep, and then it was the cows, and then it was the goats. And during the siphoning, I took a container of water over to an old grandmother who was standing there. I said, here, would you like a drink of clean water? And she looked at it and she says, I have never seen this kind of water in my life before, because she only gets brown water. And I expected her to take a long drink, and she never did. She says, wait, this has to go over to the baby animals at my house. And so she walked over to the side of the village, and she pulled a kind of a blanket back over the door, and out came some baby sheep and goats, and she gave them the water. And I said, why aren't you drinking it yourself? She says, if I keep my animals alive, then I have life. When my animals die, I die. They get first.
Wow.
So that was kind of taught me that, you know, so often we make priorities that we think are important and how things should be done, but there are others who see things differently. And it's part of our responsibility as missionaries to adapt to what is needed rather than assume we know what they need.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
What an interesting story. I'm sure we could sit here the rest of the afternoon and you could tell us tons of stories. But you're saying one of the things that you mentioned is that to be a missionary, you have to be flexible, you have to be able to adapt. What other qualities do you see are important if people want to be a missionary?
Well, the first one is that you must feel that God has called you. Mm-hmm. And really, to be more specific, God has called you to that specific assignment.
Right.
Then the adaptability comes in, because you are going to have to go in and fit into a new culture. Mm-hmm. You are going to have to do a new job, and you are going to find out that there are all kinds of other things attached to that position that you never knew about before you went. Mm-hmm. So that creativity, adaptability, and willingness will help make you a successful missionary.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for the reminders and for the wonderful stories as well.
You're welcome. Glad to share with you.
Thank you.
Fascinating experiences. Let's visit Kendu Bay Adventist Hospital, the hospital that Pastor Thomas's father established.
We're here at Kendu Adventist Hospital on the shores of Lake Victoria. You can look it up on your atlas, and you can see this hospital, which was built in 1925. For over 80 years, it has served the people of this community. It does all kinds of things. From a simple operating room, they take care of people with really very advanced disease. We have about 5 or 6 doctors that operate, that run a maternity unit. They run HIV/AIDS clinics. Hundreds of patients are seen here who are in great need. This is an institution that has a long and proud history. Names like Birkenstock, we've got Crafts, people like that who have operated out of this hospital and built it to be the institution it is. Even my own father, not a medical man, an evangelist, came here and watched a cesarean section in the 50s. I remember him coming home just absolutely thrilled with the work that was going on. At Kendu, as we are here today, I'm so pleased to be able to thank you, the viewers, for your support. You know, our mission offerings over the years have actually decreased in buying value. But as we're becoming more aware of mission, the donations, the support has increased. The people are still as sick today as they ever were. In fact, 60% of the people in this institution have an infection with HIV, and about 30% of the community are infected with HIV. So tuberculosis is rampant. In the operating rooms yesterday, they operated and did cesarean sections. They did a hysterectomy. They do multiple surgeries. Fractured bones are taken care of. People in pain and distress everywhere feel and know the comfort and compassion of our Savior through the hands of our nurses, our doctors, our missionaries, who are all supported by your means. Thank you so much for your support of Adventist Mission.
What a tremendous contribution to the lives of so many people that hospital has made. Don't go away, we'll be right back.
Treat yourself to Faith Tales of Frontline Missionaries. Every quarter, the Office of Adventist Mission releases never-heard-before stories of modern heroes. These are men and women who go beyond the call of duty to touch lives and bless people with the message of hope. This beautiful DVD is yours free if you call today. Here is the number you will need. Call today. Or visit us online.
Well, that's just about it for today's program. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you've been challenged by what you've seen and heard. We see so many needs around the world, from Kenya through the rest of the continent of Africa, through Asia, the Middle East, all around the world. There are so many people who need to learn about Jesus Christ, and they need to have the holistic ministry of Christians who care. If you'd like to learn more about Adventist Mission, don't forget that you can visit our website anytime at www.adventistmission.org. That's adventistmission.org. Please continue to remember mission in your prayers. Around the world today, we have many missionaries, we have volunteers, we have global mission pioneers. Sometimes this can be lonely, sometimes it can be discouraging. It's very encouraging to know that there is a world church that is praying for them. Until next time, I'm Gary Krause, and I hope you can join us right here on Mission 360.